Show presents Scratch a Track,
the podcast where we debate which track to scratch off some of the most known and unknown albums of all time.
We live in an era of singles.
This is an album.
People no longer listen to an album for the work it truly is.
It kind of defines a band.
It's just not something that people relate to nowadays.
We've all gotten the dreaded.
It started out as a game.
Which track on the album would you scratch out if you had to? Hello everyone and welcome to another exciting episode of Scratch a Track presented by the Dude and Grim Show. Today we are taking another classic album and we are ready to scratch off a song. But before we get into it, we should probably tell you what album we're going to scratch today. It is a newer album, a little more modern album than the albums that we've talked about previously. And that album is Radiohead's OK Computer. So another one of our favorites, Grim. I know we've kind of discussed this a little bit back and forth, although having discussed it, I'm not sure 100% if I remember what your scratch a track is. So I will be pleasantly surprised here, I'm sure. But as some of the other albums, it's a tough one to scratch a track, that's for sure.
Well, it is, and with the format of the show stemming from the game that we would play, where the premise is you're listening to one of your favorite albums on vinyl, and you got to pick a song where if by chance you were to encounter a scratch in the vinyl and it would skip to the point where it couldn't play through, you'd have to go to the next one.
None of us have ever experienced that.
Yeah, and in this case, I guess I would have to take that as a CD because CD was the predominant format when this was released. It's what I first got it on, and I do have it on a vinyl.
I do as well.
And unfortunately, being that it was not made for that specific format, it runs long enough where it would have to go on two 12-inch vinyls. So
yeah.
We're not going to play that game because it was not meant to be a double album, so you don't get one per disc. You get one for the album.
No, we'll save that for Physical Graffiti or
Exile,
the White Album. Yeah, definitely.
So with this one, you got the 12 tracks to choose from. I don't believe there have ever been any changes, as we've talked about with some albums in the past, due to the fact that they broke up tracks.
Right.
The 12 tracks stand as they did when they were released in 97, I believe.
1997. Yep. That's right.
So this came out when we were in high school, and
God, what a weird
I
time.
guess
God, what was I doing in 97?
Yeah. Now I don't know about you, but for me, I did get into this album in high school, and it wasn't until probably like senior year that I realized, because by this point I had gotten into bands like the later Beatles stuff and Pink Floyd.
Yeah.
And I don't think it was until at that age or that point that it occurred to me that like for our generation and new albums coming out, this basically was our Dark Side of the Moon. I mean,
Right. Yeah, I mean, I was definitely a late bloomer. It's not like I was like one of those people who, well, actually, I don't think anybody really followed him from. If you're one of those people who followed him from like Pablo Honey to the Bends to OK Computer, like I have a feeling if you were really into Pablo Honey, you probably didn't like OK Computer. I mean, I just got to say that. It's one thing to listen back to it and be like, oh, I could really appreciate that. And man, look how this band has grown. But yeah, no, I can't see that quite as much. For me, it was, I can't even say like I had listened really to the Bends and was like waiting for OK Computer to get released or anything like that. For me, it wasn't until it was our freshman year of college when I remember you getting Kid A. And it was, I think, you getting on a kick of Kid A that prompted us to start listening to OK Computer again and really getting back into it. And that's kind of what really put the hook in me. I'll say that. So
yeah.
Well,
and I think one thing interesting about it is we talk about a lot of different aspects of these albums, one of them being controversy. And I can't say that this album came with a lot of controversy other than it was noticeably a complete departure from what was coming out at the time, which was still kind of like grunge era stuff.
Yep.
It was way different than that. And the only thing that may have been in any way controversial in terms of the band was the fact that I think a lot of people didn't expect them to jump from where they were at with the Bends into this album, because it's quite different. And even if you look at some of the articles, even the band members themselves even kind of to some degree denounced some of what was being done with the Bends when this came out, which is obvious, I guess, in what they did.
Yeah, it definitely wasn't, like you said, it was pretty much a departure. It wasn't, typically bands don't make leaps like that, where, I mean, if you compare the Bends to OK Computer, like, to me, it's just night and day, really. And, I read that, Capitol Records, actually, when they heard the album, they were like, whoa, we were kind of expecting the Bends Part 2. And I think they initially forecasted selling about 2 million records. And when they heard the album, they lowered that forecast to 500,000, which, I mean, that's pretty crazy to me. Now, the interesting thing is at the end of, it came out in May of 97. By 1998, so the end of 97, it actually sold 500,000 in the US and the UK, and it also sold 2 million worldwide. So they basically met the initial projections of what Capitol Records had kind of expected. And I think everybody was surprised by it, and then now it's been at the 20-year anniversary, so 2017, a few years ago, it was recorded that they had sold about 7 million worldwide, which is a lot, which is really good. But if you actually go back to our previous episode where we talked about Dark Side, and they had sold 45 million or something like that. A band like Radiohead they don't have the luxury of newer technologies coming out where you have these people rebuying albums. You don't have the people going from buying the vinyl to the cassette to the CD.
True.
And then
I will say though, I know that just me, I bought it initially on CD when I was young.
Yeah.
And then I think sometime late in college, did they do no, they never did do like a special version, because I think it was the 20-year that just came out.
So I have a couple versions. I have the original version of 97, and then there's kind of a limited edition version where the album is the first, what do you call it? The first track or the first, disc. And then there is a couple more discs, and that disc is, if you remember, there was an Airbag LP, and that's polyethylene Pearly a reminder. Yeah, Melatonin. I mean, who can't forget Meeting in the Lull? But then there was a bunch of B-sides. They had Palo Alto. They did put like Airbag and Lucky Live, different versions of Exit Music and stuff like that. So there have been I've purchased or downloaded a couple of versions of this album, but I don't think it has gone through any sort of hey, this is a polished up remastered process or anything like that. And
do you need to?
I don't know. I mean, well, I'm sure it'll come out because that's what happens. But I mean, it's not like like when I believe when they redid Dark Side, they actually went back to the master tapes to a lot of stuff, and were able to get cleaner copies instead of the second and third generations. So, but yeah, I mean, with this album, I mean, came out in 97. The title actually is kind of funny, is taken from there's the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy radio series, and I guess one of the characters in it says, OK Computer, like he's talking to his computer, saying, "Okay, computer, I need you to do this," or something like that.
Oh yeah, okay,
yeah. Or I think the line was like, "Okay, computer, you can turn off now," or I don't know, something like that. And I think on tour, Radiohead in 6 or something, they kind of had been listening to that, and it's something that kind of stuck with them. So
interesting. That I did not know.
yeah, but so it was actually, it has been critically acclaimed. It's won a few awards. It was nominated for Album of the Year, for a Grammy for Album of the Year and Alternate Music Album of the Year. It did win the Alternate Music Album of the Year. So I mean, it did get a little credit, I'm sure, in true Radiohead fashion. I'm not really, I don't know if this is true, but they're typically not a huge fan of awards, so I have a feeling they probably didn't show up. But that's just, just kind of not really their style, But so the album came out in it says here May 21st of 97, and they actually started a tour on May 22nd, 97. So starting a tour like one day after you release your album, you're getting people coming to your shows who even if you're a week or two in, probably aren't overly familiar with a lot of the tracks on the album, which is kind of interesting. And typically, I mean, it seems like the record company, Capitol and I guess EMI, would want to maybe wait a little bit, but they put them out there and they kept them on the road until April 18th, 1998. That's 11 months of touring. 11 months. Oh, wow. Man. That's pretty crazy. Crazy, and it's no wonder Tom York kind of, at times you've seen interviews with him where he can come across as
he's a little crabby.
Yeah, a little crabby, a little volatile and whatnot. So, but yeah, so the first, I guess, I don't know if we want to get into maybe not some of the songs at this point, but the first single was Paranoid Android. There's 4 singles on the album. First is, Paranoid Android, then Karma Police, and then Lucky, which they actually recorded in 1995 and were actually thinking, I think at the time, of maybe putting it on the Bends as a last minute addition. They didn't. And for my opinion, I'm kind of glad that they didn't. And then No Surprises was the last single from that album.
And see, it's funny because in these days, MTV still played music videos.
They did, yeah.
And I very distinctly remember those videos because they were weird videos, number one.
Yeah.
And the songs were just different than what you were hearing.
Certainly. And
they were each very distinct. It wasn't like the band just playing their song in a stadium or something. It was like one Paranoid Android, the video was all animated in this kind of weird cartoon.
Yeah.
And I believe Karma Police, he was in this car, and at the end the car started on fire.
Yeah.
And then in No Surprises, his head's in that fish tank that just slowly fills up with water.
Yeah.
And it just, it was one of those things where to watch those, you knew this was just not your average run-of-the-mill band.
Yeah. And I did hear that they actually, at one point, planned on making a music video for each track on the album. And then it got to be too much, and I think financially just didn't work out. But the videos they're very cool, they're very different, and that is a time period where MTV was still it's still like a big deal, and people were putting out music videos as a way to promote the album and get people to buy stuff.
Yeah, sure. But my question to you is, did you submit to them your video that you made for Airbag?
I didn't. I don't even know if it's on YouTube. I still have it. It's pretty good. It's pretty good. A lot of filters. Filters. That's
you got to work with what you got.
I know you do. I mean, hey, not bad. I mean, hey, if Radiohead wants it, it cost me blood, sweat, and a lot of rendering time. So a lot of rendering time. I'd be happy to pass it along to them. So it when it was released, it definitely received a lot of critical acclaim. Sold a lot of copies, and it today is still considered, one of the top albums of all time. And just for Radiohead fans, I think this album and Kid A are probably the 2 albums that I really hear the Radiohead fans talk about and discuss, because it just put them in a new stratosphere. And then Kid A took him into, I don't know what stratosphere
Outer
that.
space.
Yeah, exactly. You
Like
know,
deep space. Yeah.
deep space.
No,
Definitely.
I hear you, and I think it's interesting because as I comparing this to their earlier work, I think the writing got a lot better, the lyrics got a lot better. They used a real big variety of instruments
Yeah.
in the composition and production, a mix of electric and acoustic instruments, and it was all done very well. And a lot of the tracks, as we talk about, they have that flow to them where, not to say musically one thing goes right into the next, but
Right.
whether it's carried over by sound or by something, it's just it flows together really nicely.
It definitely does. And if you were, it is one of those things where gosh, if you were going to put it on, let's just say you could fit half of it on a vinyl, right? You could fit one half on one side and one half on the other. What would your breaking point be? To me, I think it would. I think
After
it would,
Karma Police.
Karma Police to Fit or Happier. I mean, yeah, it does make sense. And actually, I go ahead.
That's halfway through. I mean,
Yeah, it
Karma
is.
Police is track 6 out of 12.
Yeah.
So
So in maybe this might be a well, maybe not segue into the tracks quite yet, but I did read that they toyed with the idea of Fit or Happier actually starting the album, that being the first track on the album, which I don't know. I think about it now and I'm like, I don't know if I'm not really sure. I don't know how I would feel about it like that.
be a different trip though.
It would. It definitely would. But maybe, stepping back for a second and going into a little bit of the recording of the album, they recorded a few songs in the studio, and then they wanted to get out. And there's like, I don't know. They just want to get out of the studio. And so they ended up recording kind of the rest of the album in St. Catherine's Court, which was another place for, it was a mansion, which was owned by Jane Seymour, the Dr. Quinn medicine woman. Like, she owned this mansion. And,
Interesting.
And from what I read, I don't believe she actually lived there. It seems like it was a place that was kind of rented out for events and parties and things like that. But,
okay.
But also Radiohead, there's a few other bands who actually recorded some albums there, but I think Radiohead is probably the most prominent of all of them.
Interesting.
And, let me ask you this. I find it funny. I don't disagree, and it's not that I don't understand, but when bands are first starting out, a lot of bands, we want to get into the studio, right? Like, that's what they want. But then it seems like some bands, like we've seen, like Stone Temple Pilots and even like the Rolling Stones when they're recording Exile on Main Street, they don't want to go into a studio. They either want to build their own studio or they want to go into like a house. Like, what, as a musician, what is that kind of attraction? Like, what do you think that is?
I listened to a lot recently, stuff about the band, and Robbie Robertson's talking about it, and he talked about when they built their own studio, and it was just because a lot of times if you go into the studio, there's all kinds of people around that have no affiliation to it. They're they're affiliated to it through money, but not to the art.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of times it's the group's way of separating themselves from that sort of distraction and anything that would alter what would normally happen or what they would do.
Yeah. Well, that makes sense. Yeah.
Because I much rather would do something in my own basement than go somewhere where, I don't know, it's just different. There's a comfort and like a, you know.
Well, I think one thing is too, I mean, not that you can't do it in a studio, but a studio seems like a very isolated environment. And what I hear when I read about these bands recording in houses, they're like, oh, we recorded this in this room or in this hallway or in the bathroom. Like, I think like LA Woman, in LA Woman, like the song LA Woman, Jim Morrison put his vocals, like he recorded them literally in the bathroom.
And sometimes I know it says that they did that with exit music for a film. They recorded it in some space within the house because it gave those acoustics that when you listen to the recording, I mean, it sounds like it's in an old church.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's really cool. And I think it's, on one hand, maybe a little, I don't know if I'd say experimental, but it seems to me if you're recording in a studio, everything has padding. It seems like you're almost deadening the sound. Would that be? I don't know if that's fair.
Oh,
to say,
absolutely.
but, I mean,
to artificially make space later in many cases.
Yeah. So it's really cool that they did this for that album, and I imagine.
I mean, really explore the space.
Explore the space.
They really explored the space.
Ooh, I got one for you. A little later, I'll segue off explore the space. But so just a little background with this album, and I think Tom York has said that when he was not he, but they as a band, when they were coming up with these songs and the feel that they wanted, he actually said Miles Davis' "Bitches Brew" was an inspiration and kind of a starting point for that. Is a listener.
Wow,
I know it's kind of weird. Like you're like,
I can hear that in some stuff in Kid A for sure. But
Okay.
man, I wouldn't have thought that for this album necessarily.
Yeah.
But that's interesting.
yeah,
But maybe just the idea.
yeah. Maybe just the idea. Sometimes you can't stop a good idea, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think we might be able to get into kind of going through some of the tracks here a little bit, and
Yeah, absolutely.
as we do that, we can make our mental notes of which ones we're gonna cross out. In fact, I'm not gonna lie, I kind of already know which one I'm gonna cross out. I think, but
Oh, me too.
yeah. Oh, you do? Okay. So, first off, starting off with the Airbag, there's something for me when I think about an album. The way it starts is always a very important part because you think of this sequential piece of work, and this one just kind of comes in with like a cutting kind of
Punch.
roaring guitar that kind of kicks.
Interestingly
you
enough,
there.
completely mimicked with a mellotron cello sample, which I think is really interesting. That it gives it kind of that smoothness along with the roughness of the guitar.
Yeah, and now that you say that, I can definitely I can hear that. Yeah, it gives a very interesting effect. Very interesting effect. And the music video is really good too. But
Dude, one of the best.
it is. It's one of the best. And that again, I guess maybe stepping back, I don't know if I would say the song it's not like Dark Side where all the songs flow into each other, but there is some overlap, like at the end of Airbag with the do.
Yep.
And then there's the acoustic just starts right in with Paranoid Android. And that song is Paranoid Android is just a whirlwind. I mean, it goes anywhere and everywhere.
Yep.
And Tom York really said that with this song, kind of his inspirations for it were the Beatles' "Happiness Is a Warm Gun" and Bohemian Rhapsody.
Wow.
Which
interesting.
Which what I take away from that is the from a non-musical perspective is just really the transition, the changes, the transitions, and they're intense and they're beautiful, and just the lyrics are all over the place, and it's pretty wild. I mean, I think the most famous lyric is kicking, screaming, Gucci little piggy, which Tom York was apparently in a bar in Los Angeles, and somebody spilled a drink on this woman, and she just flipped out. And he must have just thought that was like the wildest, craziest thing. And well, congratulations, because he just wrote a song about it. So
wow,
that's
interesting. I didn't know that.
Where are you now?
Yeah, probably doing the same thing.
Yeah, probably. So, and I mean that it's definitely I know we've talked about and maybe I don't know if we want to get into scratch quite yet, but or we don't want to spoil of what we won't scratch, but I think Paranoid. I was trying to think what's my favorite song in the album, and I mean you'd be hard pressed.
That's a hard one to top.
Yeah, I mean there's other songs that I like a lot in certain sections of those songs, but as a whole song, to be honest, I don't think I've ever heard. Even though "Happiness Is a Warm Gun," Bohemian Rhapsody were inspiration for that, have you ever heard another song like Paranoid Android? Because I haven't.
Oh no,
yeah,
not at all. It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
Still like the first time you ever heard it, every time you listen to it.
Yep.
And now going forward, I think that Subterranean Homesick Alien is truly like an unsung hero of the album and the band as a whole, because I don't know, I've seen them, I think 4 or 5 times. You've probably seen them more.
Yeah.
And not once have they ever played that song live.
Yeah.
And every time I get excited because I see they got a Rhodes electric piano on stage, and I'm like,
maybe this is it.
They're going to play it. Never have.
No. And yeah, I think I've seen them 5 or 6 times, and I've never been fortunate enough. And I'm one of those, of course, freaks that always goes on online and checks out the set list and everything.
Oh, sure.
Do they play it at this show? Or are they playing it on this tour? And it's weird because it doesn't seem to be any rhyme or reason. They just on a tour, they'll just throw it in there just randomly. And I'm like, it's kind of one of those hidden gems. And I feel like it's a very underrated song. I think the lyrics are great.
It's a true fan favorite.
It is. Yes, it is a true fan favorite. It is. It's lyrics are great. The opening just kind of guitar riff. Subterranean Homes. It does take you out into outer space. I really feel like it does. It feels like that. It does. It really feels like that for me.
And then going to exit music, which we kind of touched about with the space and the depth of that song, and then when it kicks into the heavy part, that's
and that song was actually recorded for Baz Luhrmann's Romeo and Juliet film. And he wanted Radiohead.
Oh, that would make sense.
Yeah, he wanted Radiohead, and it makes the movie. It's not a part in a scene of the movie, but it's the end credit track. Which is
interestingly enough, I believe they recorded that other song for the Romeo and Juliet soundtrack as well.
Talk show host.
Yeah,
which is interesting because that's one song, and it seems to be a popular song that didn't make this album. It didn't make this album, and it's not even. It's weird. It's not even a B-side. It didn't make it to the OK Computer, or the Airbag LP. It's kind of strange. I'm not sure. Yeah, well, that's something I'll have to look up.
I think it's on that like Bishop's Robes, or it's on some obscure single. But
it might be. It might be. Then we go into Letdown, and I mean, for me, it's anything but like it. I like that song. It's after going through exit music, which basically just kind of rips your soul out and shows you how black it turns before you die. It's an intense song. So I think in between exit music and Karma Police, it's kind of a softer, flowy song. I like the bells in it and everything, and it's just it's a good song. I can't say there's anything that, like, at least for me, that stands out as like, oh, this is an amazing piece of work. But for me, it's just an enjoyable song to listen to.
Yeah. The guitars sound really nice, and it's got a nice
kind of clean feel
to it. Yeah.
And then, of course, we got the next single of the album, and that's Karma Police. And I mean, this one is, I said Paranoid Android's probably my favorite song. If I had a second, it would probably have to be this one. I mean, it's
again, just remembering the video. I just remember seeing that video, and I like the song, but I was like, "What the hell is going on with this video?
Who the hell are you?" Yeah.
And the way that the synth at the end just like kind of starts to self-destruct and rip apart is a thing of beauty.
Yeah, it really is. It's very cool. So I think we said if this was a vinyl, that's where kind of we figured the side one would end. If you could do a 30-minute side one of a vinyl, or that would kind of be it. Then we go.
It would be alongside,
right?
Well, it's a halfway point.
And then we pick up with Fitter Happier, and this kind of goes into, I think we've talked about this maybe a little bit. It is a track on the album. Do you consider it a song? I mean, it's something that they've never played live. They would start shows with it, just playing the actual recording. Do you consider it an actual song?
Yes, I do, but it's hard to call it a song, because if you want to really get nerdy about it and get into the styles, I believe it's what would be called musique concrète, and which literally translates from French into concrete music, and it's basically like a soundscape type of composition that exists from manipulating existing audio sounds, which is really what they did, is just took a bunch of pre-recorded samples along with that the old Macintosh voice.
Yeah, definitely. Come on, Wishes.
Come on to play in traffic.
Yeah, and it is definitely a little more, I don't know if I say experimental, but it's a lot of things spliced together, and I don't know if I'd go full John Cage on it, but it's
no, but man, the lyrics are it's such this like weird kind of dark summary of this suburban life that for whatever reason we all
fall into.
For.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, definitely. I heard Tom York, I think he was having writer's block on this one, and then all of a sudden he in 10 minutes he just wrote the lines for Fitter Happier.
Yeah.
And I was like, well,
it makes sense. Yeah. It's like total stream of consciousness. It's awesome.
Yeah, we've got a writer here, right? Yeah. If he had writer's block before, I think he cured that, right?
Yeah.
So that transitions into electioneering, which I think for me is I like it as just like a good rock song that really kind of moves
political.
And political, and it has that strong guitar feel, and I just like the thing I like about it is the movement of the song. Like it really kind of it advances things a little bit, because and that I guess I would say, just looking at the rest of the tracks on the album, electioneering probably has the most consistent energy of any song on the album. It from beginning to end, it just kind of goes.
Yeah, I would agree with you.
Yeah, they don't.
And it's interesting because you take that and then it kind of slows down, and the sound always reminded me of almost like crickets or something that starts up climbing up the walls.
Dude.
And Climbing Up the Walls is an awesome song, and the way they use the synthesizer in that is phenomenal. Yeah. But it sounds like a dark night to me.
Dude, it sounds like, I don't know, I get this kind of like medieval times feel to it, and I don't know if there's a darker song on the album. I mean, it's
or almost, like walking around the Overlook Hotel.
Yeah, and then you see two twins standing in front of you, and you don't know what the hell's going on. So you run to the elevator, and then all of a sudden, blood just spills all over. I mean, it's crazy. It's crazy. Yeah, no, Climbing Up the Walls is it's a good one. It's kind of a live staple. They do play. I've seen them a handful of times, and I think they've played that most of the times I've seen it. Then we move on. You go from Climbing Up the Walls, this intense thing that's just like building and building, and the strings come in at the end, and it's
no surprise.
right. And then all of a sudden it just drops, and all of a sudden it's no surprises. And I mean, it's got the intro, is just, it's just got this slow kind of lullaby almost feel to it. Would you say? I mean,
but the interesting thing is, to me, yes, I would, and I can see why people would characterize musically as it being almost kind of dull. But the one thing I will say is that, to me, it is like the part B lyrically of Fitter Happier.
Okay.
It's talking about all these same things, and it's really like dark. It sounds like it's just kind of melancholy, but it's actually really dark if you listen to the lyrics.
It reminds me a little bit of when we were talking about like Maxwell's Silver Hammer, right? Where where it kind of has this, it's kind of like fun, almost fun little feeling. This doesn't have quite the fun feeling, but it's almost like the words don't match, at least for me, necessarily with the song. It's very contradictory.
No, I agree.
So then we go on to Lucky, and I think I mentioned earlier that song was one of the first recorded. Maybe it was the first recorded, and was, I believe, no, the third single. No Surprises was the last single. Lucky was the third single of the album, and it has starts off with they played this song live a ton, and and also they opened
several times.
they opened a lot of shows with it, and I love this song. I think it's really good.
Oh, yeah.
It's got it has not really stark transitions like Paranoid Android does, but it goes from low to high. It's
distinct.
It goes from low to high multiple times.
And one thing I like is, and it might be a weird thing to touch on, but I've always liked how that sound, almost like that crickets type of sound that I referenced before, starts out the song.
Yeah.
And seeing them do that live, that isn't like some weird synthesizer generated sound. They do that with their guitars and a series of pedals, which I think is kind of cool because it uses the instrument in a way maybe you didn't think of.
Sure. Yeah. No, it's it's definitely a song that I put up there. It just has a really good flow to it, and it's definitely one that I enjoy hearing. Then we come to the end, last song of the track of the album. We have The Tourist, Johnny Greenwood's Pride and Joy. And I heard that, so Johnny Greenwood, I think he's the one who kind of orchestrated this song and came up with everything for it. Tom York wrote the lyrics, as I imagine he does for all their songs, but his lyrics were inspired by apparently he being in France and seeing all the American tourists running around just trying to see all the attractions and everything, which I mean, that doesn't.
You can
sounds pretty American to me.
And you can really hear that in the lyrics.
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah, and I can just imagine. Especially, I mean, he wrote this in '97. I mean, can you imagine what he'd have to say about that now? Like everybody, like running around, Paris and
with their phones,
with their selfie sticks and phones in front of the Eiffel Tower, trying to get the perfect Instagram shot and story and everything. So it's It definitely, it's for me, it's a song, and I'm not sure why I do have an attraction to it. Is it kind of slows down the album. The whole album has been all over the place and kind of chaotic, and I feel like it's just like it's kind of the fade out for me. It's kind of, hey, we're gonna.
That's an interesting point, and now that you bring that up, and then talking before about the Miles Davis influence, like it's very similar to what he does at the end of Bitches Brew, the album, because the whole album has been kind of crazy and chaotic and intense. And then there's a couple really slow songs at the end that for me, I could never understand. And maybe that's just because it's easier for me to relate to something with lyrics.
Yeah.
But the way that you said that right there, that is a very big mirror between the two for me, which touches on what you mentioned earlier.
Sure.
Interesting.
Yeah. I mean, the main, the main lyrics, of the song are, hey man, slow down, which is
slow down,
which is, to me, is actually kind of interesting because I feel like in a sense, it's almost similarly related to how we were talking about Dark Side on the previous episode of, there is no dark side of the moon. It's all, it's all dark. And this, it's like Radiohead's like, oh, we're going to make this crazy, crazy chaotic album, throughout the whole thing. And then on the last track on the album, we're going to tell you to slow down. It's almost like, maybe we should take some of our own advice here or something a little bit. It's just,
that's cool.
I'm probably getting a little too deep, and I'm sure if Tom York ever listens to this, he'll be like, dude, I don't know. No, I wasn't thinking about that at all. I was thinking about butterflies in the park, but it is fun to, project and think about those sorts of things. And
I mean, the whole thing about art is that it's meant to be interpreted by the one who takes it in too. So
sure. And
which brings me to the crux of the game here. And
the game,
with all this being said, and there was a lot said about this one.
Yeah, we're at about 40
probably
minutes.
because it was so timely for us.
Yeah.
In our lives. But with all that said, What's your track and why?
Well, again, it's, I feel like this game is so far, especially with the albums we've chosen, is like a double-edged sword, because it's like all these albums are great, and so it's really, really hard. It's like I'm picking what I feel like is like the worst of the best, my least favorite, and I go through the list, and I think about a song like, and I'll call it a song like "Fitter Happier," and in my mind as a non-musical person, I think about that, and I'm like, well, could I do without it? Perhaps. But I like where it fits in the album. I like the message that it sends. So I think I would keep that on there. And the one that it just doesn't do it for me. And it's a single, it's popular, it had a music video, and I think a lot of people like it. And I think no pun intended, a lot of people will be surprised. Is No Surprises.
Yeah, okay.
I just,
okay.
There's something about it that I think, like I said earlier, it's kind of like a lullaby. To me, a little bit, it almost does put me to sleep.
Lulls you to sleep?
Yeah, a little bit. I just, I do like the words. I do like the lyrics. I don't love, I think the feel of the song. It makes sense to me, though, why it is on the album and why it's there and why they placed it where they did. I do think is, even though I would cross it off, I think it is a great song to put after Climbing Up the Walls, because after you've climbed up the wall, you're kind of ready to jump off. So it does make sense to me why they would put No Surprises there.
Yeah.
It's just, to me, it's kind of the worst of the best. And if it wasn't there, I don't think I would miss it, but I say that now.
Okay,
so
that's fair.
Yeah. So
that's fair.
What do you got for me, man? Drop it. Drop your scratch.
Despite this conversation, in which you articulated your interpretation of The Tourist in a way that, number one, I hadn't thought about, and number two, was very easy for me to appreciate. Yeah. I still would have to go with The Tourist. Not that it's a bad song.
Sure.
It is a good song. Again, like, how do you take a song off this album? But that one could also lull me to sleep, and, it'd be one of those ones where, not that I wouldn't miss it, but I'd miss the other ones a lot more.
Sure. That's fair. And on that note, I can't... I do like that song. It is, okay. If all right, let's say I had to, No Surprises was off. If I had to pick another one, that is the tough call.
Yeah.
And I do think if you did take The Tourist off the album, I think it would feel and flow just fine ending with Lucky.
Sure.
I would not have a problem with that. I can't. I can't fault you for that. I definitely can't.
I mean, dude, we're standing on the edge.
Yeah.
That would not be a terrible, but
right. Yeah,
no disrespect to The Tourist, but also wouldn't be a terrible line to end with, because it's very fitting.
It wouldn't. Yeah, I agree. So I got No Surprises. You got The Tourist. But yeah, definitely.
And we got OK Computer in the bag.
We got OK Computer in the bag. Definitely. Yeah, it's this was a tough one. I mean, it was a great one, and this is, it's a lot of fun to play. Definitely there's, with other bands, with the Radiohead, there's a lot more to explore there, and I'm sure we will down the road. So yeah, we got OK Computer in the bag. So I think that about wraps it up here. We definitely one of our longer episodes, but I know this record's meant a lot to you and me, and just
hopefully others.
Yeah, hopefully others. And it's, again, like you said at the end of the previous podcast, if you haven't listened to this or haven't explored Radiohead's work, I highly recommend it, because they got some good stuff, and they go a lot of different places. So
yeah.
So that's going to wrap up this episode here. We thank you all for listening and sticking with us. So far we've done a couple episodes. This is the game we're playing, Scratch a Track, and we would love you all to continue listening. So please make sure to add our podcast to your list and subscribe to this channel, so you can get notified the next time a classic album comes up.
Scratch a Track is produced by the Dude and Grim. Additional music provided by More, that's ... MORE, and the Tims, TIMNZ. Copyright 2020, The Dude and Grim Show.